Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. Just a few months ago, Ethiopia and Somalia were on the verge of conflict. A controversial port deal between Ethiopia and Somaliland, an unrecognized breakaway region, sparked outrage in Mogadishu, which labeled it an act of aggression. Tensions ran high throughout 2024, but the year ended with an unexpected agreement brokered by Turkiye. On December 11th, the Ethiopia-Somalia Ankara Declaration was signed, granting landlocked Ethiopia sea access. And just this week, Somalia's president visited Addis Ababa, where the two nations fully restored diplomatic ties and pledged to deepen security and trade cooperation. The African Union praised the accord as a milestone for regional stability. However, not all are optimistic. Egypt's foreign minister recently warned against any non-Red Sea country establishing a presence in the strategic waters. For more, joining me now from London is Jonathan Ofeansa. He's an Africa analyst and the founder of the Africa Briefing magazine. From Trieste, Italy, Federico Donelli, an assistant professor at the University of Trieste. And from London, Michael Amoa, a senior visiting fellow at the London School of Economics. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. Ethiopia and Somalia, an issue that was once a cause of concern, now maybe a point of optimism. Jonathan, a end-of-the-year deal in Ankara, a peace deal. How are you viewing the first 1 to 2 months of that deal unfolding?
Well, I view it with much optimism. Of course, when Ethiopia signed that deal with Somaliland last year, we all know, the swift and very, very harsh reaction by the government in Mogadishu, by the Somali government. They were very, very actually very strong in their backlash against that deal. But thankfully, Turkey stepped in, negotiated, and now the peace deal has been signed. And the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has even paid a visit to Somalia. So that goes to cement, the newfound peace between the two countries. So I view, the situation with very much optimism.
Mm-hmm. Federico, a visit by Sheikh Mohammed, the Somalian leader, to Ethiopia, restoring diplomatic ties. Positive development, is it not?
Yeah, of course, it is a positive development, and it is another step following the Ankara agreement or the meeting in Ankara between the two. And I think is important, especially in relation of the condition of the two African countries so far. I mean, Ethiopia has a lot of problems in terms of domestic problems. We know about the Amara region. We know about the still long-lasting situation in Tigray. At the same time, Somalia has a lot of problems in relation of some federal states like Jubaland and Puntland, where there's an ongoing offensive against Islamic State. So for now, it's important for the two states to, in some way, I don't want to say solve the dispute, but try to mediate among each other.
Michael, Federico just counted a bunch of domestic issues that could become spoilers. How concerned should both of the countries be, their leaders be, about these internal issues playing out and spoiling the progress of this peace deal?
Well, first of all, it's great that this peace deal has been struck. Although, of course, we're aware that Somalia has internal issues with Puntland and recently Jubaland. Ethiopia also has its own, internal problems to resolve. However, I think it's quite clear that the relationship between Ethiopia and Somalia is paramount. I mean, both countries have prioritized the restoration of the relationship between the two, and that is quite paramount over and above any internal problems that they have. To the extent that Somalia has now agreed for Ethiopia to contribute its troops towards the AWSOM, which is a replacement of ATMIS. And that is quite strategically important because if the troop contributions are not enough and Al-Shabaab is not contained, that will cause problems for both Ethiopia and Somalia. So this is a good time going forward. And I think that the AU is also prepared to ensure that the 12,600 troops that are supposed to come from all the troop contributing countries are lined up, because the financing is also now available from the UN. And everything seems to be lining up, right from Ethiopia and Somalia coming together, with the financing coming together, and the troops also coming together. Everything seems to be lining up really well. And I think what we really want to see is that Al-Shabaab is contained. All this is happening because we want Al-Shabaab contained. And that has to happen. That should be a deliverable, a key deliverable thing that we can, that could be pointed at the end, that when all this was set up and everything was done and provided for, Al-Shabaab was contained. That is really the key resolution or end that we're all looking for.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, it seems that many of the outside actors are also happy with this deal. Positive comments coming from the United States, the EU, and also most recently the African Union. Which outside actor could play a proactive role in furthering this peace process and agreement between Ethiopia and Somalia?
Well, for right now, I do not see any major actor, maybe apart from Turkey. I mean, one could mention the US, but it appears with Trump returning to the White House next week, his agenda, Africa agenda, will be nothing, to put it mildly, will be nothing to write home about. And then we have maybe the Gulf countries, maybe Saudi or maybe UAE. But then, even the UAE hasn't got a good record, when we talk about, the civil war in Sudan between the army and the RSF, with the UAE being accused of supplying arms to the RSF, and the US actually imposing sanctions on some RSF commanders and about 10 UAE Abu Dhabi companies. So for now, I see Turkey, playing a very, very big role. And again, one could also mention Egypt. But then we talk about Egypt. The relationship between Egypt and Ethiopia is also good due to the different disagreements over the Inca Dam, the Great Renaissance Dam that Ethiopia has built, and which Egypt says, will sort of curtail or maybe disrupt its access to the Nile waters. So for now, I see Turkey, playing an increasingly, a prominent role, in Africa, especially in the Horn of Africa.
Mm-hmm. Federico, Jonathan mentioned Egypt, and obviously Egypt having its own problems with Ethiopia, whether it be the dam issue, whether it be other issues as well. Is it supporting this agreement? Because we saw a statement from the foreign minister saying they don't want to see non-Red Sea countries in the strategic waterway. That kind of sounded like they were talking about Ethiopia there. But again, I don't think Egypt wants to see conflict either between Somalia and Ethiopia. So where do the Egyptians stand on this?
Well, we know that since the signature of the Memorandum of Understanding between Ethiopia and Somaliland, Egypt immediately reacted because consider the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden as a kind of strategic influence area of Egypt. So they do not want to see Ethiopia access to the coastal line of the Red Sea or the Gulf of Aden. This is a big problem, and I think that even though Turkey is trying to do its best in order to mediate, to find a solution, the core aspect of the dispute between Somalia and Ethiopia, that is the Ethiopian access to the sea, has not been completely addressed so far. So Egypt right now, in some ways, trying to build, along with Eritrea, a sort of anti-Ethiopian coalition. So I think that the regional dynamics will reshuffle again in the next few months, and we have to see how Turkey will be able or not to manage this reshuffle. Of course, an agreement without the Egypt is not a real and reliable agreement.
Mm-hmm. Now, Somaliland, breakaway region, it was probably very happy when it signed this deal with Ethiopia, getting some type of quasi-recognition. Now it seems that deal has fallen through. Where does it leave them, Michael?
Well, that's a very interesting point because, let's face it, one day Somaliland will be independent from Somalia. What's also interesting, actually, is that Trump, too, the second presidency of Trump, they have it on the cards that they would like to see Somaliland independent. And that's quite a big call because it would probably mean that the AU also has to do what it takes to smoothen out the emergence of Somaliland as an independent state. So going forward, the statement by the Egyptian foreign minister that they only want to see littoral states having any naval presence on their shores, we don't know whether that's sustainable, because once Somaliland becomes independent, it can take its own decisions regardless of what Somalia thinks. So we just have to watch the space and see how this develops. For the time being, really, it would appear that containing al-Shabaab in Somalia is one very top issue, which I'm sure Egypt would agree to. But as regards, where exactly the situation is with Somaliland and Somalia and the prospect of Ethiopia ever having any shoreline to do whatever it wants to do, that is a debatable point at the moment because we don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So, Michael, you're basically saying Somaliland's independence is inevitable. Jonathan, are you sharing that view?
Yes. Look, let's go back to history. I'll just cite, some examples, maybe outside of the continent. So many years ago, when I was a teenager, Bangladesh broke away from Pakistan. They fought a bitter war, and eventually, Bangladesh was able to establish its own sovereignty. And you go to Hargeisa, Somaliland today. Some people in Somaliland are rather anxious, very eager to see Trump return to the White House next week, because the general feeling is that Trump, like Michael said, Trump is bound to recognize Somaliland as a sovereign nation. And should that happen, and again, like Michael said, maybe it will compel the AU maybe to smoothen the way for other countries to follow Trump's lead. But then, having said that too, Africa, we don't have to wait, or maybe wait for a foreign power or a big nation to take the lead and then we follow, Somaliland's case, or maybe Somaliland vis-a-vis Somalia's case, must be taken on its own merits. Somaliland has been autonomous, nominally autonomous for so many years, for about 20 or so years now. And I don't see it, being reintegrated into the greater Somalia. I see Somaliland, like Michael said, I agree with Michael, eventually becoming, an internationally recognized sovereignty. That is about to happen. So whatever happens now would just be sort of postponing or deferring the inevitable.
Mm-hmm. Now, Federico, there's a very nice photo of the Ethiopian Prime Minister and the Somalian President in Addis Ababa, obviously the restoration of diplomatic ties. Not only what is next, there's also a lot of vague parts of the agreement. This still doesn't solve Ethiopia being landlocked. How do you see this Ankara Declaration maturing going forward?
Well, that is another good point. I mean, this is a problem that most probably Turkish foreign policy maker have been trying to address, and most probably they propose an idea of alternative to Berbera. I don't know, maybe Mogadishu, but we have to be honest, and Mogadishu is not a real alternative. Mogadishu, we know that is not a safe place, especially the way from Mogadishu to Ethiopian border is not safe. So most probably an option could be to proceed with a kind of economic agreement between Addis Ababa and Somaliland. So postpone the idea of independence, but proceed in cooperation, economic cooperation. So I think that the role of Turkey could be important also in mediation between Mogadishu and Somaliland. Turkey is able to keep open doors, open channels with both actors. So in some way, it could also broker some kind of agreement. So I think that we have to see what happens in the next few months.
Well, in the next few months, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is expected to visit both Ethiopia and Somalia. Michael, what are you expecting the Turkish president to say to both leaders during those visits?
Well, first of all, we expect that President Erdogan will congratulate them, first of all, for restoring diplomatic relations with each other and allowing Ethiopian troops to help with AWSOM and containing Al-Shabaab. And then he would also encourage them to, take things further. First of all, we're aware that Turkey itself also has interest in Somalia, energy interest in Somalia, and would also want to see that materialize. And therefore, in the process, Turkey will be attempting to broker, a more sustainable deal between the two countries. I mean, it would appear that somewhere along the line, both sides, Ethiopia and Somalia, would see the light in actually maintaining cordial relationships with each other because they both need that. And it's actually in the interest of the Horn of Africa itself for littoral states to actually allow access to the sea to non-littoral states. That's really the sort of situation we have across the continent, whether in Southern Africa, West Africa, and the Gulf of Guinea. It is actually part of UNCLOS. UNCLOS actually does say that littoral states should grant access to non-littoral states. That is enshrined. So I believe that President Erdogan would sort of try and square the circle, if I should put it that way, and try and negotiate better relationships between the two, and also look to see how some other aspects of the futuristic long-term plans can be realized.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, I want to ask you a hypothetical question. Let's say the Ankara Declaration wasn't signed. What was the potential for conflict, and what would it mean for security in the Horn of Africa?
Well, if it wasn't signed, I fear that there could have been an escalation, because I recall Somalia denying Ethiopia Airlines, access to its airspace, right? And if that agreement hadn't been signed, there would have been further escalations that would have maybe resulted, in some sort of an armed conflict, to further, destabilize, an already unstable part of Africa. So it's a good thing that President Erdogan stepped in, mediated, and this deal had been signed. So if it hadn't been done, I wouldn't like to think what might have happened. The situation would have escalated into an armed conflict.
Federico, same question to you. Were we on a path towards armed conflict? Was war avoided with this agreement, or would there just be a lot of posturing tensions, but not spilling over to direct kinetic engagement?
I think that the de-escalation was in the interest of all the actors. Of course, it was resulted from the efforts by Turkey, but at the same time, from both sides, Ethiopia and Somalia, they want to avoid an escalation because they cannot afford the kind of conflict they've got. As we said before, many problems, many domestic problems. So I didn't expect a full escalation, a conflict. But of course, the high tension in the region, and especially the deployment, the most probably deployment of Egyptian troops on the border with Ethiopia could be another problem. So could be a path toward the conflict, of course. So this agreement in some way favor the dialogue, and that is the most important aspect.
Mm-hmm. Michaels, in February, most likely when the Turkish president visits Somalia, especially, there's going to be a lot of eyes on that maritime and defense deal. Turkey beginning, obviously, search and discovery in Somalian waters for hydrocarbon assets, also providing security in those waters. How important is that deal, and do you expect any further deals between Turkey and Somalia?
Oh, yes, I mean, that deal is quite important. At the very least, I mean, Turkey has been a trusted, mediator and is interested in fulfilling that role going forward as well. So that is ongoing, and that also somehow spurs on Turkey to make sure that it is successful in, brokering, the cordial relationship between Ethiopia and Somalia, because as that is happening, Turkey's energy interests in Somalia are also, I mean, that sort of paves the way for Turkey's energy interests in Somalia to also become fruitful. I mean, at the very least, if there's trouble in Somalia, it's going to be extremely difficult for Turkey to realize its energy interests in Somalia itself. So peace is crucial. I mean, plans underway for cementing, a deal between Turkey and Somalia about the energy prospects are quite advanced. So in February, we're talking about, putting pen to paper and signing things. And also in February, I mean, by February, the panel of experts, the UN panel of experts on Somalia, the sanctions committee against Al-Shabaab have been extended. And so we're expecting that ALSOM, which is the replacement of ATMIS, will carry on with the interdiction of the maritime embargoes against Al-Shabaab to prevent it from actually escalating further. So we're talking about a ban on the components of improvised explosive devices. We're talking about a ban on illicit imports of arms, the charcoal export ban, anything at all that basically allows Al-Shabaab to thrive. There's a ban on it.
Jonathan, if hydrocarbons are proven discovered off Somalian waters, and we see some good news coming from the Turkish search and discovery ships, so research and discovery ships over there, will that create more tension discovering hydrocarbons, or will the Turkish presence, security presence, ward off any other countries in the region trying to create a maritime territorial dispute?
No, it will rather, actually, I'm not sure it will lessen tensions because, look, every business, every government likes to protect its investments, and should Turkey get involved, in any energy projects, in Somalia or off the Somali coast? Yes, it will take steps to protect that investment. We see that happening in other parts of Africa. So I don't see Turkey's involvement in the hydrocarbon, sector, in the Red Sea or off the Somali coast, triggering any unnecessary military or civil tensions in the Horn of Africa.
Jonathan, Federico, Michael, we're out of time. Thanks for joining me and helping me unpack this issue. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.